check it out. What's going on? What's happening? Alright, here we are, man. We're going to be talking about hair transplants today. Now, I got the angle kind of messed up. That's alright. We're going to make up for it with the conversation with Joe. His journey was arduous, long, but very fruitful. He's had a pretty good journey. He's helped a lot of people on his journey. And in comparison to how many hair transplants I've had 3. Joe has 10. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation, so enjoying that. One of the things I've wanted to talk about was transformations, personal transformations, which clearly this topic covers. But I'm also talking about little transformations in our lives. There are little flags of things that we've accomplished. It doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be world-shattering, but it's yours. It's your little flag. For me, when I was younger, I joined Tae-Kwon-Do, and I got pretty good at it. I wasn't really good at hurting people and fighting. That wasn't what I was for. But I enjoyed the artistry of it. I enjoyed testing the boundaries of my body at the time. It gave me something to do where I didn't have much to do. There's a lot of things that go with that story. But for the most part, that was a wonderful journey. It allowed me to afford a place to go. It was very affordable at the time. I think it was $10 a month at the time. We're talking like 1984, 85. I got to go to Arkansas and test in a big tournament. I got second place trophy. I actually had the president and founder of ATA sign the bottom of the trophy. It's just a great victory. I remember seeing that going, okay, all right, I'm a cocky young kid who was really in great shape. And it was a good time, and it was a lot of fun. Now that I look back, I'm glad I had it. And I came back with the trophy, and my mom and dad were leaving at the time to go visit someone in Milwaukee. I lived in Racine at the time, and my dad was all proud of it. Gave him something to brag about when they went visiting, so that was cool. You know, those are little victories. Got some pictures. My mom was nice enough to take some pictures. My buddy was nice enough at the time to take some pictures. So we got to capture the moment at the time. And it's little things like that. I mean, I can't go back and show you anything with regards to being in the 5th or 6th grade, but I went on a talent show. And what possessed me to sing a cappella, I do not know. And the first song I sang was BETH from Kiss. BETH from Kiss. If you want to see a really good movie, sorry, I love movies, but if you want to see a really good movie, it's called Spinning Gold. And Spinning Gold has the storyline where there's a guy who started this record label, signed these people in this group, couldn't move them. And these groups were, one of them was Bill Withers, one of them was Donna Summer, oh God, who else? Well, Kiss. And in that movie, there's a story about Beth. I just recently saw it like a year ago, and it took me till the 5th grade, until now, to get that story about what Beth was. So I'm going to let you go see that movie and see what that's all about, or just go on YouTube and type that in. I'm sure there's a scene somewhere, somebody snapped it, but it tied it all together for me. I thought that was kind of wild. So you never know how things will transpire in your life. You can learn something new every day, man. So I'm going to keep this super short today. It's about transformations. It's about making things happen for yourself, whatever it is you want to have happen. Sometimes it's a healthy obsession, but it's a good thing. It gets you there. But before we get to the conversation with Joe right now, let's check out today's design highlight, which is, heavy bench presses. I don't do heavy bench presses anymore, but bench presses don't have to be heavy. They don't have to be heavy, and you don't have to be a guy to do them. You can do bench presses if you're a female, just as well as if you want to be super intense and do it in that manner. You don't have to do it in that manner. You can do very light, and I am using 15-pound dumbbells. I'm not getting crazy. I'm just trying to keep consistent and keep movement going without straining too hard. It's enough twice a week for me right now. So you got to be careful when you get a little older. So that's the thing. But do them. If you belong to a gym, they got a stationary equipment. is stationary, so it'll keep you in a stationary position, which is why it's called stationary equipment. It'll keep you from hurting yourself. So if you want to start there, start there. If you want to start with the barbell, 45-pound barbell by itself, you throw 45 pounds on each side, that's a lot. That's a lot. So be careful. Make sure you always clamp the ends. You know, but I love this design. I like the way it's shadowed. I like the way I separated the guy from the bench on certain colors, especially like blue like this. It comes out really good. Red, it pops really good. It pops great on black. I love this design. It's one of my favorite designs, and I like wearing it on my muscle days. So I'm making today a muscle. Today's a muscle day. It's a Sunday. I'm going to do muscle day today anyway. But anyway, I hope you enjoy the conversation with Joe. Check it out at the end. And if you haven't yet done so, please like, subscribe, boom, hit that bell. All right. Take it easy. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Peace.
Mr. Bob.
What's going on? I like your mic. I like your setup. You got a nice setup.
Thank you. How are you?
Very nice. I'm good. How you doing?
Very good.
Looks like it works out nicely. So appreciate you taking the time out for me, Joe.
My pleasure, my friend.
Yeah, I just thought I'd put something together, get content out there, and some of the things that's, my life journeys. And clearly, this has been the best journey that I was on, the hair transplant journey,
Yeah, nice.
And being that you have been in the business, accessible in this business, not many people are accessible in this business like you are. So that's appreciative.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's tough to be accessible, honestly, because, when like early on in my career, when I was working for just for the clinic, that was my job to be accessible. And it was kind of, well, it was very unique in the beginning because there wasn't anything like what I was doing at the time where, a patient had been visible and known by others on, various discussion boards at the time. And then because of my documenting my own journey and then transitioning into working for the clinic and becoming visible in that aspect, no one had done that before.
Right.
It was a labor of love at first because I was so fascinated by this procedure, this surgery that had formerly ruined my life.
Sure.
So I thought,
Sure.
or it didn't really.
Sounds like it became a healthy obsession, though.
Yeah, it did become a healthy obsession after I started my repair journey. Like before my repair
Before we get to there, man, I just want to kind of see real quick, before we even get on that, because I really want to step into that. That's an amazing, your story is amazing. The fact that when I say accessible, people who some of them are not around. Rugger's not around anymore. He was a great poster. He's a great guy to talk to about the journey.
Well, you know what? You do know why he's not around, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
He passed on. He passed on. And these things happen over time. He was a great guy, fun guy to talk with. He took me out to dinner when I was in Seattle one time. He was a good man. Good man. And of course, there's Futsy Head. He was, there was another guy who was putting his stuff out there like you were.
Mm-hmm.
So it gave a guy like me an opportunity to look at that. But before we even get there, you were once in a place where you never had a hair transplant before. You were there once. What was that like? What that feeling that led up to that very first hair transplant you had thereafter?
Well, I was 22 when I had my first hair transplant, but it was in high school that it was first pointed out to me that I was losing my hair. Never even gave it a second thought. Not even on my radar. I don't know if it was 11th grade or 12th, but I was sitting in the cafeteria. And I remember hearing someone kind of making these comments in a consistent order. You will, you won't, going down the line. Like you could hear it. Like it stood out from the normal conversation, the drone of conversation in the room. And I turned and I saw this kid coming towards me, and then he gets towards me and he goes, and you will, and moves on to the next. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, you're losing your hair. I'm like, huh? Furthest thing from my mind as a 17-year-old. You planted
that seed. You didn't have it in your head until it was eventually going to happen, but you never even had it in your head.
Yeah, wow. Exactly. I remember maybe a couple of years later, my best friend at the time, you met him. He and I started talking about this, at some point. He brought it up to me. After that event, it was on my mind sometimes, but it never became a problem for me until I saw that it was a problem for others by talking to my best friend who brought it to my attention about his own struggles. And then it's like, okay, fine. Yeah, I guess now I'm worried about it because it is a thing. We would talk about it every once in a while. And this is the early 90s.
Things were different.
No one talked about this stuff. And
right. You had your opportunities, which were hair pieces.
Yeah.
That was on I was on the TV at the time.
It wasn't on the radar for me simply because my loss wasn't extreme. It wasn't even beginning. My loss it still wasn't a big issue for me, but I was cognizant of the issue at the time because it was brought to my attention. It was a discussion I was having with my best friend at the time. He was more concerned about it than I was. I was moderately concerned. Fast forward 1992-ish, he called me up and he said, I need you to go with me on a road trip. And that was like, sure, where are we going? That's what we did back in the day. And we would drive 3 hours just because we wanted to.
Sure.
So he said, I need you to go with me to Knoxville. Okay, what are we doing there? He goes, I'm finally going to have a consultation with a hair transplant doctor. I'm like,
so he just dropped it on you like that?
All right. Yeah, dropped it on me. I was like, all right, fine, let's do it. He goes,
you trust him.
I was like,
you trust him enough that that he's got your best interest. His best interest.
He was my brother. Right. He was my brother. Yeah, okay. I had no, and it was for him, not for me.
Mm-hmm. So he was there for he knew you would support him, just needed you.
Yeah, so it's like, all right, fine. And because I knew afterwards we're probably going to go to like get some hot wings and beer.
Sure.
I was like, I'm down. Let's do it.
Okay.
We went, and long story short, went into the clinic, and I'll never forget. I remember seeing pictures of celebrities on the wall, and it gave me the impression that, oh wow, this guy he works on celebrities. Alan Jackson, country music star.
Okay.
Was pretty big 90s and in the 2000s with a signature on the picture, like a autograph. It was a like, when I think about it, I've not thought about this in a long time, but as I think about it now, like that was a great subliminal sales tactic. Pretty underhanded actually, but we're sitting in the consultation. The doc is talking to my buddy, and he's telling him everything needs to be done based on what the discussion was presenting to him. And then he switched to me and he goes, so we can help you too. What would you like to do? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, you're losing your hair, so we can do a hair transplant for you. I was like, well, I'm not really losing, like my hairline's fine. My crown was a bit thin, but still very acceptable by today's standards. Like if I had come to myself today as a 22-ish year old and I saw the crown that I had then, I'd say no, you're not a candidate.
Right.
Hairline, 2A maybe at the time. Stay the course, kid. You're fine. Medication, go with God. Right. Fine. Take off. The doctor had to convince me that I needed a hair transplant. And so next thing you know, we're making it a fun, hey, let's do it together kind of thing. And we're in the chair. Not that day. Like we came back a few weeks later.
But you made a commitment.
Yeah, we were in. Showed us some before and after pictures of I don't even know if they were his actual patients. And next thing I know, a couple weeks later or a few weeks later, we're both in the clinic. It turns out it's literally a mom and pop shop. There was the doctor, there was his wife who was a nurse, there was his daughter who was a nurse, and all three of them were working on both of us at the same time. 2 separate rooms. And
what the hell, man. Oh man, looking back, it's almost horrific.
I remember being excited because lunch was a fantastic Dagwood style sandwich, deli sandwich, right. Pastries and stuff. And I just thought like that was red carpet treatment back then. I was such an idiot. Yeah. And then that was the beginning of the rest of my life. And I had no idea.
Okay. And then how much grafts did you get in your first surgery, and how did you feel about it afterwards?
The numbers are fuzzy. I think it was 300 to 400 grafts.
Really?
And these were mini micrographs also, which were bigger than traditional, what we know as follicular unit grafts today. They had multiple follicular units in each graft. So
right. So it kind of looked like doll hair then.
Yes. And at the time, he was placing the grafts into my existing hairline. He wasn't lowering my hairline. Thank God. But he was And I think I learned this, the reasoning after the fact. I asked him, why didn't he lower the hairline? And he said, oh, well, we place them into your existing hairline so that when your existing hairline recedes, you'll have this new hairline to back it up.
Already in place, right? That's his philosophy behind it.
Yeah, and he used, what seemed like carrying logic of, your hairline height now is fine, but because you're losing your hairline, you'll recede into this more adult looking hairline, and then you'll be fine. I mean, who am I to argue? Like, we found this guy in the yellow pages. Yeah, so who am I to argue? It's like, okay, well that does make sense. That's logical.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know exactly. Well said. And the recovery from the surgery itself, was one of the most painful experiences I had had in my life up to that point. Physically painful. It was terrible, actually. The pain after the fact, yeah, it was a very painful recovery. Had to sit up in bed for 4 days, had the turban of bandages and towels and everything around my head. But then after the pain and swelling, all that went away, it was business as usual, just being a stupid 22-year-old kid living my life. But then my buddy, he started to notice that he didn't really care for his result.
He's being honest.
Yeah, he was being honest. And I recall me not being too happy with mine either, because I was like, well, it's not really thicker than it was. The hairline situation isn't looking too good because I'm receding into it already.
Right. And we're how long into this now, this conversation?
9 months.
Year? Oh, 9 months. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Because if I remember correctly, we both had our second surgery inside the same year, not calendar year, but inside the same 12 months. What do you know? We found ourselves back in the surgery chair again for a complimentary touch-up. And after that, about the same number of grafts, I believe. And then I didn't realize until later that the strip, which was a new procedure at the time, because plugs were still the more dominant surgeries. So thank God this doctor was cutting edge, quote unquote, in that regard, where I didn't have a bunch of 4mm punctate wounds all over the back of my scalp. But he took out one strip, and then for the second surgery, he took out a different strip above the old one.
Okay, wow, that's different.
So I wound up having two scars, one above the other. And both of them were fairly wide, 1/2 to 3/4 of a centimeter wide each, but with a gap in between that actually had hair.
You're literally under a year later in the chair.
Yeah, exactly. And remember the hairstyles back then? It was we weren't doing the big 80s hairband type of hair anymore.
It's grunge.
It was grunge, and our hair was longer. Short hair wasn't really a thing. As I've explained to people who have asked me in the past, why don't you just shave your head? Well, it's like, well, I had 2 scars in the back of my head. I had this really bad, pluggy looking transplant work. And if you were a head shaver, you were a skinhead.
Back in the 90s, yep.
Yeah. So it wasn't a thing to even consider. But it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't on my radar.
Right.
For several years, it wasn't on my radar until when I was about 25, I had my first encounter with someone noticing what I'd been through. I was done. But my friend did go back in for number 3, and that, again, turned out bad.
Did you keep going back to the same place?
Yeah, we went back to the same place. He complained the 3rd time, and I think they made him pay the 3rd time because maybe he just wanted more. I don't remember the details, so long ago.
Sure.
But I decided I'm done. I did ask my first intelligent question when I was in this chair for the second surgery, and that was, what happens if I lose more hair? And the doctor looked me square in the eye and he said, oh, you're not going to lose any more hair, at least not till you're 50. And then, at that point, then you can come back, with a smile on his face. Who am I to question this? Mm-hmm. It was a doctor. It was the man in the white coat. So I used to talk about how we're conditioned from childhood to trust in the man wearing the white coat or woman wearing the white coat. And that's what I did. I was just like, oh, okay, well, all right, he's being straight up with me. Right. And so, yeah, it was just a couple years later that someone actually brought it to my attention about, why is your hairline like that? And that was just the beginning of the end for me, as far as I'll say my naivete about what I'd been through. Sure. And I realized it wasn't just a mistake. It was a life-altering, terrible decision I made. Back then, I'll say from 95 forward, when I started to really deal with the repercussions of my decisions, of my actions, it was a fairly common, well, it was a daily occurrence where I'd be speaking to someone and their eyes would not be looking at my eyes. I learned very early on. My dad taught, when you speak to someone, you speak to them, you speak to them in the eye.
Yeah.
Like I learned that long ago. And I noticed really quick after that moment when someone brought it to my attention that people weren't looking me in the eye. They're looking at my hairline. I became more and more self-conscious because of it. I wrestled with it, and I couldn't do anything about it because, again, there were no resources for research into repairing the issue. And so I sucked it up, and I wasn't working in jobs where I could wear a hat. I was in the restaurant industry for many years. In the restaurants I was working in to make ends meet, they're higher end. They weren't like, Burger King, anything like that. They were like restaurants where you couldn't wear a hat. I was suffering through it in a manner that did benefit me in many ways later in life, such as not having really any fear of public speaking, no fear of speaking to people, strangers in person and in groups. Like I can speak on stage and not have any, maybe a little bit of butterflies, but it's not something that bothers me. And I think that my experiences of having to deal with people knowing I've had a hair transplant and maybe making snide comments about it put me in a position where I could actually handle that better than had I not been through that. And it wasn't until, was it 2002 that I actually got my third surgery, which was my first repair surgery. Early January 2000, I moved to Seattle. Okay. And I'd been there for a year and a half before I was in a position where I needed to start to seek out repair because I'd been married and we moved out to Seattle, and then, divorce happened. That was a blip in my history. But then once that happened, it's like, well, shit, I'm on the market again. Maybe it's time to get this shit fixed. MHR and late night infomercials, Bosley, those types of things. For as terrible as they were, I have to give credit where it's due. It was a medical hair restoration infomercial, late at night. Like I'm in my new apartment. Most guys in that situation, fresh out of that breakup, they're in their new apartment, which has no furniture except maybe a futon, which is what I had, and then my TV was on the floor. I did have a PC at the time because I was in the IT industry. It was sitting on the floor, didn't have any tables or anything, and I'm sitting there 2 a.m, or whatever, feeling sorry for myself, and a commercial for MHR came on, and I was like, maybe it's time I look at this again. I logged on whatever dial-up internet I had at the time, CompuServe, I think, and went to this little website called Google, and I typed in hair transplants.
Thank God for Google. I tell you, man, when that moment happened for me and I typed that in, I remember just coming across Hassan and Wong, your picture, Hassan and Wong, and thinking to myself, there's something here. There's something here. Yeah. So please continue because it's a wonderful journey.
Well, thank you. And I didn't see Hassan and Wong at the time. I did see online communities, different forums. That's what I saw. And it was like, wow. Okay, so people are talking about this now. I think I joined one of them and I asked the question about Seattle, like who's in Seattle, and someone replied and said, well, there's Hassan and Wong. I was like, oh, okay. So then I went and looked at them and found the local office, which was a consultation office only. It wasn't the clinic. They didn't do any surgery in Seattle. It was simply consultation. And that's when I met Mike Ferko.
Yeah, Mike is the guy who talked. I originally talked to Doug when I first called.
Yeah.
And Doug was great. Don't get me wrong. I love Doug and he was great, but I was still on the fence with doing anything with anyone. Yeah. About a half hour later, Mike calls me back. Mike. Come on. Yeah. Mike.
And
Mike's the guy's guy.
Mike Ferko, he became a lifelong friend to me because he was definitely a salesman, no question about it. But
he was a straight shooter.
What I loved about Mike was he wasn't one to bullshit. Like he loved to bullshit about sports, and he loved to talk like a guy's guy does. If we're to be critical, he wasn't a great consultant as far as the medical side of things, the science, but like he couldn't explain that kind of stuff.
Nope, that wasn't his forte. His forte was to get you out of your own head and look at the results.
Yeah. Yeah, he was very good at that, and so made the appointment, went and spoke to him. But he told me, he's like, yeah, you don't have great donor hair. You got these 2 bad donor scars in the back, and he thought we might be able to get 1,800 grafts, and it would be a strip, and you'll still have 2 scars, but one of them can be cut out. He was very grounding for me as far as expectations. When I left his office, I was on cloud 9. I remember this very vividly. I felt so relieved and almost like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Like, wow,
finally somebody I can trust.
I can actually get this fixed. This is amazing. I feel so good about this. And then it's like a record scratch. Wait a minute, this guy just told me everything I wanted to hear. I need to keep doing my research. This is like the first place I've talked to. I need to talk to other places. So I went online, and that's when Joe Tronic was born. So I went back onto one of these forums, and I started asking questions. I said, hey, I went and met this guy, and he told me basically everything I wanted to hear. Is this place legit? Like, several guys came out of the woodwork and said, yeah, I went there, and yeah, Mike's a great guy. And, I had my surgery, Dr. Hassan. I had my surgery, Dr. Wong. No one had pictures. No one's really sharing images of their results. And to be fair, it was difficult because 2001, it was actually still 2001. So no one had pictures, because there were no cameras that you could take pictures with. Camera phones were not even a thing. Right. At the time, the goal was to get smaller and smaller flip phones. Right. It was tough to get pictures. Right. But I was asking these questions, and I got a phone call from Mike Ferko, and he goes, let me ask you something. Yeah, what's it? He goes, are you Joe Tronic? Yeah. He goes, what are you doing this Saturday? Nothing. What you got? He goes, come back to the office. I want you to meet someone. I'm like, all right.
That's exactly how it goes down too.
Yeah. That was my Ferko impersonation. I went back to his office. It was like 10 minutes from where I lived at the time. And he had 3 guys there waiting for me. One of them was like 6 weeks out from surgery. The second one was 12 weeks out from surgery. It just happened to be Doug Klein, the consultant.
Right. Sure.
He wasn't at the time. He was also just a patient. Sorry, Doug was 6 months, and then the third guy was 1 year. He had hair like me, medium brown, medium dark brown, fine. I was like, "That's a transplant?" He goes, "Yeah." I was like, "That's all I needed." Like that. That was it. That was it. It looked natural. I had no idea transplants could look that good. Again, this is 2002. This is early 2002. His result was just about a year, so he got it done in early 2001.
And it was around 2002-ish point where they were starting to fool around with mega sessions.
At the time, the definition of mega session was different than it is now.
Right. Back then, it was 2,000 grafts with a mega session.
Ish, yeah, around there, and that was a big deal, because if you could get 1,500 grafts in one strip, you were a trailblazer. Mm-hmm. Hassan and Wong were not known for; they weren't really known. Period. In the grand scheme of things, they were just another clinic that was taking part in some different websites. I drove up to Vancouver. Like Mike told me, he goes, "We got an opening in like 3 weeks or something like that." I was like, "Okay, yeah, let's do it." I worked out the money part. I actually refinanced a new vehicle. That's how I was able to pay for my first hair transplant. I had no idea. I had no idea you could do that. You can refinance your car a second time and get cash. I did it through my credit union at the time, and got the money, drove up, and that was the longest drive of my life, because I was driving from Seattle to Vancouver, which is more or less about a 3-hour drive, depending on traffic. And I remember getting across the border. And when you're driving from the border to Vancouver, you go through a lot of farmland and wide open pastures. And it's like, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful drive. But it gave me a lot more time to think, because there wasn't really anything to see. No one knew who Hassan and Wong was at the time. They were just another clinic in a very small market. The anxiety was building during my drive, and it got to the point where I had to pull over. When I pulled over, all these emotions and fears came out, and I was literally weeping on the side of the highway. And I had to I called my buddy that was there from the beginning, and I was like, he knew I was going through, and I told him I'm having second thoughts, and he's actually the one that talked me into. I could have turned around if he said, you know what, if you don't feel good about it, turn around. I would have. He helped me through it, and I continued the drive and got to Vancouver. It was fantastic, very surreal, really, really strange to. I mean, that's why I was having, second thoughts and having such a hard time with it. It wasn't an easy thing for me to do. Like the only person I had in my life that even really understood what I was going through was my buddy. I had no local support. I was by myself, because when I moved to Seattle, it was just with her, and I no longer had her in my life. So I was by myself, and I got to the clinic the next day. Actually, no, it was that morning. I forgot, because I'd driven up really early in the morning. So it was that day I got to the office. When you park downstairs and you go to the elevator, like you saw in that video that I posted of my last hair transplant, there's this short Asian man that was waiting for the elevator as well, and that was Dr. Wong. I had no idea it was him, because I never met him. And I get inside, and long story short, we start talking, and he tugged at my scalp. He goes, "Oh, you okay? It's kind of loose here. Okay, I think we can maybe get both scars." I was like, "Really?" Had the surgery, got really excited, because during the bathroom break, I was looking in the mirror, and I was like, "Oh my God, those are so small, and there's so many of them." And that's when that's when it hit me that I was in for a change. I wasn't concerned about the growth rates, because those weren't things that people processed in their heads. It wasn't a question of it was going to work or not, because with the lack of documentation in general across the board, you didn't see failures enough to be concerned about that for yourself. You just were wondering if it was going to be enough, basically. But I was really excited, because I saw the difference from what I'd been through 9 years prior. And that's when I was like, you know what? I should probably start taking pictures. And I have my little Fuji Fine Pics. And I started asking if I can take pictures of my grafts being dissected. I took selfies, trying to aim it.
Crude at the time, I remember.
Yeah, it was very crude. And then I told my family about it later on. I built my first website, because you'd sign up on Yahoo Mail for your email address back then, and you get a whopping 10 megabytes of free web space. And so I built a little website, and it was like a long or alphanumeric domain that you'd have to copy and paste as a link, because no one would find it otherwise. And I sent that to my mom, and she shared it with Dad, and they're like, "Okay, well, good luck. You've done it, so good luck." And then I decided, you know what, maybe I should show the guys on the forums. And that was it. That was the beginning of Joetronic, which was my online handle at the time, becoming Joetronic, where, as you said earlier when we first started this call, it became an obsession to document in near real time what I was going through.
You were doing this for, initially, you weren't really doing it for anything other than for yourself, right?
Yeah. Well, and to share, like, because people were asking me, how to go. And because, I was sharing online that I was doing this. And so I was like, well, this is what it looks like. And I was the first person to really start posting up the photos. And then I can't say the first, but it was alongside Futzy Head. And Futzy Head, that was his online persona. He had a surgery with Dr. Hassan about the same time. And so he and I started comparing, or it almost became like a battle, like a game.
Who could do the most?
Who could do the most original progress photo.
Sure.
And so, so there I was on the top of the Space Needle. There I was on my boat on Lake Washington. There, all these out and about type of videos. And then I got to hand it to Futzy. He did the first shower pic.
Sure.
And I was like, damn it. Damn you, Futzy. And eventually Futzy, he had a second one.
Right. He was the first one to do it, where it passed over the whole thing. So he had the whole thing done, then he did it again, a whole thing done, and they just packed it in even thicker.
Yeah, because he had 3,000 grafts the first time, and then 2,000 grafts the second time, and those were his documentation was probably the first mega session as we knew them to be back then.
Right.
My first surgery was groundbreaking, because it was 2,406 grafts in one surgery. But I also had 2 donor scars taken out, and my donor area wasn't great to begin with. So, like, that was a big surgery for a virgin scalp. He took out 2 scars at the same time. So that was
amazing.
Like if I didn't have those scars, I would have been a 4,500 graft surgery easy.
I see. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Which would have been groundbreaking at the time because no one had done a surgery that big up to that point. Yeah. So Futzy was the first mega session per se, and then to document himself, and then we just kept he had his second surgery, I had my second surgery, which was actually bigger than my first surgery, and then he stopped, and I kept going until the third surgery, which was basically the last big surgery I had. It was 2,488 grafts, and then I was done going for the bigger sessions, and then everything after that was just like I think I had a BHT test surgery after that. It was like 100 and some odd grafts for my chest. And
remember that. That's right. Didn't you have didn't they say
stretch.
your skin was rather elastic, more than most? And you were a plastic man for a little while there, man. It's like, what the heck?
It would bounce back better than most. It was actually considered to be average laxity, but after I would heal, it would return back to its previous state. It wasn't any tighter than it was before.
What a wonderful attribute to have.
Yeah, and that's what allowed me to have, the multiple surgeries post repair. I had a few more to where finally I tapped out. Like it was like, okay, no more strips. And then 5 years ago, I had an FUE surgery. It wasn't a big one. It was like 800 grafts. 100 of those were put into the occipital donor scar. Interesting. I did have my last strip surgery was actually 2 strips, but it wasn't like before where they're above and below each other like this. They weren't vertically stacked. There was 1 strip on my left side and then 1 strip on my right side because the occipital region was done. Like it was like, we're not going in there again. It was a little too tight, and we don't want to risk any stretch back because it did stretch prior to that surgery, and we did a revision on that, and now I count that as one of my strip surgeries was the revision of the occipital scar. Turned out great, fine, and then for this last FUE surgery I had, 100 grafts were put into that occipital scar to make it basically disappear, and it worked. Like you can't see it when you comb through it, and one of my last videos I did about my own case, my own journey, I do comb through it to show that you just can't see it. The sides were never an issue. The scar itself turned out really well here and here. Yeah, so the rest of my FUE grafts that didn't go to my donor scar, they went into my crown just to kind of fill that in a little bit more, balance out the density, and that was it.
How long have you been in the hair transplant business now, would you say?
I officially started working for the clinic as an employee in October 2023. So just over 20 years. Unofficially, I was talking to patients just to share my experience. I wasn't working for the clinic. They weren't paying me or anything, but testifying on their behalf as an advocate for the clinic for probably a year before that. I say officially, I've been in the industry making a living for just over 20 years. Okay. Actually, no, almost 21 years coming up on October. Yeah.
And actually your YouTube channel is what, 13 years? 13 years ago, you put your YouTube channel up. What was it? The Hair Transplant Mentor. Now it's the the original Hair Transplant channel.
I did my first video. I started the channel actually in 2006, I think, when YouTube first started. You can look at my YouTube channel and see it shows you when it first started. I think it was 2006, and those were videos I put up for the clinic, but they were of me talking about. I remember one video I did was comparing needles to blades, and I had a mushmelon, and I drew a hairline on it. And on video, I actually used surgical instruments, 23 gauge needle, 25 gauge needle, and flat blades that I'd cut myself using the blade cutter that they use for surgery. I showed what the differences are in the melon between using needles and blades.
Yeah, I remember
because back then there was all the arguments about what's better, and my point was, well, blades are flatter, therefore less surface area is damaged when the incision is made, therefore less trauma. One incision by either makes zero difference to anything, but when you have thousands of those compounding those little differences, it becomes a big difference.
I was looking over here at your top 3 videos. The top 3 videos you got are 2 of them feature celebrities, one good, one, I'm going to quote this, horrible. So I see those two. And then, of course, there's the one that says, do not have a hair transplant. These are your top 3 videos. Do not have a hair transplant. I love that.
That was my the do not have a hair transplant video. That was my very first one as an independent entity in this industry, not working for a clinic.
Okay.
And that was the first in the my hair transplant class series also, where I'm just talking about different things that people should understand about the industry. And that video got me so much shit because people are like, well, who are you to say don't have a hair transplant? You've already had, 8, 9, or whatever many I'd had at the time. I think 9. It just showed me that in either
watch the video.
A, they didn't watch the whole video to the end where I explain what I mean, or B, if they did, something's wrong. They didn't get it. And that's fine. But the whole point of that was don't have a hair transplant until you've taken the time to understand what it is exactly you're getting yourself into, and you understand the fact that it might not turn out to your expectations. Like I probably tell more people than not to forget about hair transplant surgery entirely. I don't think that they've grasped what they're getting themselves into, because nowadays, compared to when you and I first got into this, as far as surgery goes, there's a lot more misinformation than there is correct information. Could even say disinformation.
Yeah. Well, you have to have the power of discernment these days, and it's challenging when you got a lot of crap going at you, more now than ever.
Well, you have 2 things that are way different than they were 20 years ago. The first thing is you have a lot more clinics that are in the game vying for everyone's heads to get in their own chairs. But number 2, you have a lot more, I don't want to say self-proclaimed experts, but people that think that they know what they're talking about. Unfortunately, they're sharing information as they see it, but it's wrong. For instance, I remember some of the more benign examples. I remember this one person on one platform was saying that medication is something that specific medications like oral minoxidil is not available in the United States at all. And something similar about some type of, I think, topical finasteride. And I thought, for someone that's supposed to be kind of aware of what's going on in this field as a layperson, how can he say something so wrong? And these kinds of things, I'll come out and I'll check them on it, I'll correct them on it. But it's really strange to me that people would say that. But then on top of that, it's disappointing because people will believe that, and they'll stop their own quest to find the medication that will work for them. Like, oh, well, this guy who apparently is kind of respected on this platform says that this isn't even available, so I'll stop looking, when nothing could be further from the truth. Things like that. I mean, sometimes it's benign things that don't really make a difference one way or the other. But then there are other things where people will talk about surgical procedures, like the differences, and they don't understand what the differences are, and therefore they're falsely influencing people with bad information. And that's something I've been trying to battle, but it's really difficult because there's so much out there, and I'm one person. And there are some others that are also trying to do the same and fight this information. It's a losing battle. Like I have no illusions thinking that I can change the direction of the industry with education, because I can't. I'm one person. But that's what we're dealing with.
Now, how long have you been working with Spencer on The Bald Truth?
Well, I first started calling in as a professional in the industry before 2010, I think 2006, 2007, when he was still on terrestrial radio, and then eventually satellite radio. But I officially joined as co-host 9 years ago.
And Spencer's been fighting the good fight for how long now?
Almost 30 years, 25
30 years, man. That's amazing.
Yeah. He first wrote his book in 97, I believe, if I remember correctly. And that's what put him on the map. New York Times bestseller. And this wasn't self-published stuff. Like, this was a big publisher had actually taken on his book and published it. And it's still in production. It's still being published in multiple languages. I think 10 different languages, maybe more.
Wow. Good for him. It's important to have these conversations. He's keeping the conversation alive. You're keeping the conversation alive. But more importantly, you're keeping it honest.
And that's the difficult part, because not everyone wants the truth. It's not sexy to hear the truth when it doesn't validate your own perceptions of what's going on or what you want to achieve as a patient. It's interesting because there's a very well-known doctor that's on social. When I say well-known, I mean through social media, not because of his work, but because of his social media. He revealed to a mutual acquaintance that he doesn't agree with our message. He's not crazy about what we do because he doesn't agree with the message that surgery is the last resort. And I found that surprising because, every doctor is supposed to first do no harm. If they can help someone without surgery, that is the preferred way. That's according to the medical ethic. That's what you should do. But he's not the only one. Like there are a lot of doctors out there that challenge what we say privately because they think that we're pushing patients away, which is detrimental to their practice. Not any specific doctor. But what they don't understand is actually it's beneficial for their practice, because if they develop a reputation for being ethical with their patients because they do turn patients away, then it makes them more desirable to other patients.
But it makes sense to be ethical because at the end of the day, this human being has to live with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as I tell patients, it's like, well, you're the one that has to live with the outcome, not the doctor. Once you're done with that doctor, tomorrow's another day and they're not having to deal with you, but you're having to deal with them because of what they've done on your head.
I'm grateful. I'm happy for you. Having come into, at the time that we ran into them, I would say they're 2 of the top 10 doctors in the world at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So now are they still together? I haven't even looked it up.
Yes.
They're still together. Yeah.
Yeah. They're still working together. I don't keep in contact with the clinic per se often, but I do speak with Dr. Wong at least probably once every couple months. We'll have a chat and just catch up, or if he wants my opinion on something, we do talk in that manner. He's on my website as one of the doctors I think is worth considering, but he doesn't pay me for that. Like every other doctor, there is a financial arrangement. That's how I make my living. But they were reviewed above and beyond what you can find just doing your research as a patient. They give me access to stuff that you can't see publicly. But when it comes to Dr. Wong, it's like, how can I do what I do with the hair on my head without including him on my website? So his position is basically an honorary position. I still think he's worth visiting, of course. I want that to be clear. There is no financial arrangement with me and Dr. Wong. So
yeah, I'll tell you, I remember the time I had to make a decision on which doctor. It's Hassan and Wong. Which one do I go with? I don't know. I'm looking at both of the results. Literally, you could have flipped a coin. Just flip a coin. Now, to me, I'm leaning towards a certain direction I wanted to go, which led me to lean towards. So out of this plethora of amazing work, I had to see who did I resonate with that looks more like me. Your hair doesn't look like mine. Your head doesn't look like mine. Futzy heads kind of did. So I kind of, I'll be honest, I originally went with Wong, and then the last week or two while still looking at it, I just felt myself going over here. It could have went either way.
Yeah. And and that's a lot of people went through that or go through that when you have a great clinic with multiple doctors that are all doing great consistent work. Yeah, there's going to be that conundrum. It's like, okay, so I found out one clinic to go to, but now it's like, Jesus, which doctor do I choose? So there aren't a lot of clinics out there that are like that. Very few clinics have multiple doctors that have any sort of profile that's visible online. Yeah, they still do. As it stands, they are still working together in the same location with most of the same technicians they've had for the last 10, 15, 20 years, which is amazing.
Now, for me, it's been 20 years. Coming up to this September will be exactly 20 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of what I love wearing it like this. I love it. I love the fact that I can just get and go. And this is kind of the look I was going for when I originally was going to get my first surgery done. I was just regular guy Bob, and I was at the airport, and I saw a friend of yours. And I didn't know he was a friend of yours, but it was this short, cocky guy walking around with a buzz cut. Yeah. And I thought to myself, I want to have that one day. I want to be able to buzz my hair like that one day. Sure enough, I'm over at the clinic talking with the doctor and talking to you, and then your buddy comes walking in.
Yeah.
So for me, at that moment, I knew I was in the right spot. Seeing this, the fact that I didn't even know he had a hair transplant to begin with, and then seeing this cocky guy with something I wanted to be able to do one day. Yeah. Here I am. I'm able to do it. and you look still great. I mean, you're keeping well with your health, clearly. You know, you
Thank
look
you.
good, and it helps a lot as we age to take care of ourselves better.
Yeah, it does. And but yeah, it's funny. I'd forgotten about that story where the backstory in that is the guy that my best friend from high school, he eventually came out to have Dr. Wong do repair on him as well. His case was not as fortunate as mine because his scalp was tighter. He'd had those 3 surgeries with the previous doctor where I only had the 2, and his scalp characteristics were not as favorable as mine where his laxity hadn't returned. It was tighter, but Dr. Wong was still able to, he was able to get 1 surgery out of my friend and got, I think, 4,100 grafts, which was shocking. And then, got into the medication, preventative measures. He did eventually go into using dutasteride as opposed to finasteride. As it stands now, he's actually a head shaver. So he's been a head shaver for the past probably 10 years and a bodybuilder. So it works. Yeah, and when I say bodybuilder, he's jacked.
Everybody goes through their journeys. My journey led me to lose my hair at 23. By the time I was 27, I was in Norwood 5 at least.
Yeah.
And I was going from there. So I was getting married at the time. So I got a hair piece. So I got married. I got my wedding photos. That carries with it its own challenges and ignorance. You have to walk around being ignorant to the fact that you're wearing a hat with hair on it. That's just what it is. I don't care how you slice it, but it allows these little tiny hurdles allowed me to be where I am today, which is just it's not that it's behind me, but I'm so grateful I was able to get a second chance. Most people never get a second chance or even know the possibilities are there. The fact that you did what you did allowed me to see that it was possible, and then to be accessible and converse, and then actually allow someone like me to get involved, get in there and see what's happening as it was happening to you. I'm so grateful for that. So thank you for that, Joe. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thanks for the kind words. It's, everyone goes through their journey, and I'm the kind of person where when I latch onto something, I give it 110%, because it does become an obsession for me. And documenting at the time was an obsession for me. I had my camera with me all the time. Now I could not care less about that because there's nothing. I'm thinking about doing, a follow-up video on progress in my hair or the lack thereof, because nothing's changed, and to talk about what it's like to live with this long term, the good and the bad. I mean, it's not 100% rosy. There's at least one shortcoming with my surgery in 2024, and I can go really short with my hair. What's interesting is the direction of hair growth in the donor region determines visibility almost as much as the physiology of scar formation, because it depends on how hair flows on your individual scalp. Some people are fine with it, but in my case, after multiple strip surgeries, I've had so much skin tissue removed so that the pattern of growth in the occipital and bilateral donor regions above either ear, the growth patterns do not match up. So that's a challenge. It doesn't bother me, which is one of the gifts of age. Like, as you get older, there are things that you just don't care about as much.
Sure.
But you can see my hair is pretty short. I think you can see that.
Looks great, man. It's good on you, man.
But when I do go shorter, there is that line just because of the differences in pattern above and below that cut. Mm-hmm. So that's the only real downside, and it doesn't really bother me. But
you know it, nobody else does.
Yeah, I mean, if you know what you're looking at,
not had that conversation with me, I would have never known to even consider looking there.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, no one thinks about this. It was actually eating crow is not something I do often, but if I see the need, I will. There was a doctor I know, he did say that this is an issue, and at the time I said, well, it's not an issue for me, but my hair was much longer there than the style I wore was much longer. With a shorter haircut, yeah, you can see it. So I've admitted this online. Like I changed my tune on that, and I agree with his position on it now. But ultimately, it doesn't matter to me. So
right. I like to think of it as behind me. I try not to go. I like to go forward in life. I don't look behind me. It's been fun with me here, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem, man. Glad we got it worked out. Hope it helps you and anyone that sees us in the future. And as far as like a final word to share on this, surgery is the last resort. Try everything else before surgery, because once you're cut and you can't go back.
Right.
Everything else is reversible as far as treatments, PRP, exosomes. If you don't want to do that anymore, you don't have to. You can stop. Medications, you can stop. You might see some sort of outcome from that, like stopping, continuation of hair loss, but you're not scarred. You're not physically damaged from any of that compared to surgery. So try everything else first and leave surgery for the very end.
And if
hopefully
you do decide to do surgery, do your research.
Yeah, 100%.
Because to me, there's a lot of doctors out there that just want to keep you coming back surgery after surgery. What do they call them? Hacker splicers, whatever they call them.
Yeah.
And there are
different
people
things
out there like that.
Of course.
They exist.
I also tell people I'm not the only resource. So,
that's what Mike said. And that's why he made me decide to want to go forward, because he says, take a look at everybody else out there. If you see something better, go with them.
A powerful way of presenting the option. So yeah, he was really good at what he did. And he's no longer in the industry or working for the clinic. We stay in touch every once in a while. He's still a good guy and enjoying life.
What's new with you before I let you go? What's new with you? Where are you headed now? Do you see anything happening with traveling more again, or are you just
there's some clinics I'll be visiting. I don't need to visit them like I used to, because with technology, like the things I need to see at the clinic, they can do a video walkthrough for me. But I still go to clinics. Like last time was a few years ago. I was in Turkey I went to the ASMED clinic for the second time, actually the third time, but that was also due to being invited to a conference, which was nice. And then I did go to another clinic while I was there, and I got some more to that I'm coordinating with. So it will be happening. I just don't have any firm dates. But of course, videos will be coming out from those as well.
Yeah, that's great that you're still in the business, because people are still going to lose their hair and they're going to have questions.
Yep, nothing's changing.
Yeah. All right, Joe. Thanks again, man. I appreciate you taking the time with me on this 2 times over, man. I appreciate it.
Not a problem, buddy. Thanks a lot.
We'll be in touch. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.